Did you learn a lot from the stereotype activity we just did?
I didn't get to participate because I was being punished in the hallway.
Exactly. So this is common. So obviously we talked about it earlier. If you're not in the classroom, it's gonna hurt your education and it's gonna lead to consequences. So Cheyenne and Jordan are gonna go off that and talk about how to handle that specific situation a little bit better.
So diving a little bit deeper, just to go back and reiterate, our overall action plan today is we would require all licensed employees of schools to go through a behavior management training, like the one, similar to the one that we're taking you through today, at the time of their licensure renewal. So as an educator, our first license after we graduate is good for 5 years, and then every 3 years after that we would have to renew it. So it would be every 3 years that school officials would be going through this training. And I have a quote on the board from Nelson Mandela: "Education is the most powerful weapon in which you can use to change the world." So we believe that education on the topic of the school to prison pipeline is ultimately the best way to solve it. So, like we talked about before, zero tolerance is one of the biggest issues or factors that contribute to the school to prison pipeline. According to Merriam-Webster.com, they define zero tolerance as a policy of giving the most severe punishment possible to every person who commits a crime or breaks a rule. So, just to give you guys an example, throughout being an education major at Mount, we're required to go out into schools and observe teachers. So during one of my observations, I actually observed a zero tolerance policy in one of the schools. The policy is called Zero Club. So every student at the beginning of each month is put into Zero Club. When they are reprimanded or punished or get a tally mark or a poor choice mark, we call them, they are taken out of Zero Club. So that is obviously zero tolerance to misbehavior in a classroom. At the end of the month, there is a Zero Club activity that all the kids who are left in Zero Club are able to go to participate with the principal. So obviously that is not fair. You may have kids who are ADHD, who are on IEPs, who are just more likely to act out, and again, you don't know the reason why, and you're reprimanding them and only giving them one chance of fixing their behavior. So that is a real good example of a zero tolerance policy, so you can apply that to the definition.
Okay, so now that we understand what zero tolerance policies are, for our action plan and how to implement this to help you make improvements or to educate yourself a little bit on how to help get rid of these zero tolerances and make an impact upon them, we call it behavior management. So from what Stephen and Hope were talking about previously, understanding that information is key prior to learning about behavior management. Because of those unconscious biases that you have, it can easily seep into your instruction within a classroom. Even if you are not a classroom teacher, we do have paraprofessionals who work with students. Some people are PT, physical therapy. We have many different people who come into schools and work with children. So your unconscious bias can affect many children no matter what your role is in the school. So I chose 3 behavior management techniques that I thought there's very many out there, but these are general in a way that you can understand them, and they work very well, and there are many examples that can fall within these 3 techniques. One that's used in schools often, and this doesn't require anything but body movement and body language, is proximity and eye contact. So when a child may be misbehaving in a classroom, or they're not technically performing a desirable behavior that you would like to see, you just use your body language. Maybe you move closer to the child, you don't deviate from instruction, you're just giving them the idea that maybe the behavior I'm performing right now is not appropriate. And making eye contact too makes them realize that you have seen their behavior and you're noticing it, and they get the feeling that they should not be doing the said behavior. And this is a great way, instead of, there's no need to go embarrass a child in front of the classroom, especially if a child is just simply a little bit off task looking at something on the wall, something different. There's no need to do the policy that Jordan spoke about, now you lose a check and now your month may be ruined, especially for kids that are younger. That can be a lot. That can impact them very heavily. Another technique that we can use is positive and negative reinforcement. So a positive reinforcement is giving a student something that they desire. Positive and negative reinforcements are both good for a student or a child in the classroom. A negative reinforcement is not to be mistaken for something that is bad for the child. It is actually taking something away that they didn't want in the first place. So an example of a positive reinforcement, the child raises their hand, they're rewarded with praise. Thank you for raising your hand, thank you for participating. The verbalizing of giving them reinforcement to continue the said behavior, and they understand that it's a good behavior that should happen within the classroom. A negative reinforcement example would be the child has performed well in the classroom, they are participating, they are staying on task. We lessen the number of problems they do on a homework assignment. The child probably wasn't very excited about homework in the first place, so now we're going to lessen that a little bit and they'll be more prone to continue those behaviors within the classroom. The third technique is positive and negative consequences. So these are different from reinforcements. A positive consequence, we want to increase a good behavior in a student. A negative consequence, we want to decrease a bad behavior within a student. So if we want to increase a good behavior with a student, like I said before, they can be rewarded tangibly. Schools do ticket systems, and as you bundle up tickets at a certain period, you can cash in as if it were kind of like fake money in a sense, and they're rewarded with a tangible prize. And a positive consequence can always be through praise and verbalizing. Negative consequences, you want to decrease that bad behavior. Maybe a student is continuously out of their seat, has struggles to follow directions. We remove a privilege. And I want to explain that even though it is a consequence, it is not as harsh of a punishment as removing the child from the classroom. I would not suggest to remove a privilege such as recess, where a child can go outside and experience recess. Definitely would not remove, they call them specials, it depends on the school. Music, the extracurriculars, those aren't privileges that should be taken away from a child. Sometimes we like to say the punishment should fit the crime. If a student is simply just talking out in class, that doesn't mean it's a zero tolerance, you're going to the principal. Now you lose out on anything that you were desiring throughout the day. Small things, especially depending on what the child is doing within the classroom. So we have scenarios that we handed out. And we gave some to people prior to doing our presentation. So these scenarios, and we'll ask specific people at certain times to act accordingly. I want to preface that these scenarios, I would like us to act as if we are within a classroom. If you are not an education major, totally understand, but we have all clearly been in a classroom before. We all understand what it's like especially when we're in elementary school, if a child's misbehaving, some of the things that happen. So what I would like us to do is when I ask the said person to perform their behavior, I would like us to get into the mindset of we're sitting in a classroom, we're supposed to be, paying attention to instruction, doing whatever. And after they perform their little role, I would like us to talk about maybe what we could do that is staying away from the zero tolerance policies of kicking them out of the classroom, and and I understand that we're not all education majors in here, but a positive way to approach that behavior. So if you have scenario number 1, could you play your role, please? Good, thanks. Not all behaviors in the classroom have to be outlandish or outrageous to deserve a type of redirection or proximity or reinforcement or consequence. So, thank you for doing that. that's actually a very good example of possibly a student who has ADHD in the classroom. It is very hard for them to attend to tasks. Sometimes it's very hard for them to concentrate on work that's given to them. Attention spans in all children are short, but especially with students with ADHD or students with disabilities, it's harder to keep their attention. So, does anyone have an idea what we could do to redirect the behavior or address it without having to be as harsh? What technique could we possibly use for her to redirect her in the classroom?
I feel like you could probably do positive reinforcement, like kind of like walk over to them and like, I don't know how like it would fit in reinforcement, but like just kind of like talk to them like, hey, what do you need? Like, do you need me to go over something again? Do you need more time? Like just something like simple like that.
Yeah, that's a very good answer. We don't always have to address them as if they are a problem. Sometimes students need that extra attention. Just the redirection for her can get her on task throughout the rest of the day. It's just that little bit of attention that she needs for that split second. And it's always nice too to ask students, do you need help? Do you need something? Just sometimes assuming that they are acting out to act out is not what we want to do, especially that's what leads to the zero tolerance and the school to prison pipeline, treating kids as if they are a problem, treating all misbehaviors as if they're bad. So we have this second scenario, and we're going to approach this a little bit different.
So scenario number 2, me and Cheyenne are going to act as teachers. So Cheyenne is going to first be the teacher, and she is going to play the role of the teacher first, and she's going to go about the certain situation in a certain way, and then I'm going to take over and we're going to re-go through the scenario again, and I'm going to act in a different way. And we're going to ask that you guys pay attention to how we act differently and determine which one of us goes about this situation more appropriately than the other.
So if you have scenario number 2, could you please act as if however the card asked you to, please?
I'm not doing this.
Now remember, Micah, when we complete our assignments, we can be rewarded, right? So we really have a few problems. So once we finish them, we can maybe earn a ticket, okay? How's it going, Austin?
I don't want to do it.
You don't want to do it?
I do not want to.
What about it don't you want to do?
It's stupid and I don't want to do it.
Do you think maybe if I helped you,
No,
would it help a little bit?
probably not.
Probably not.
I don't think so.
Well, I think maybe if we take some time together and sit down and work on it, that you'll be able to like it a little bit more, and we can get it figured out. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Thank you. You can go ahead now.
So that was the first one, so now I'm going to take over and we're going to restart scenario number 2. So go ahead and react it. Like I see you only have a few problems done. Can we try and get the rest done so we can earn a ticket when we get our paper done?
Yes.
Keep working, I'll be back to you in a second. Austin, why don't you have your work done?
I don't want to do it.
Alright, well then you can just go down to the principal. I'm not going to deal with that today, okay? You really want to fix Thanks for being a trooper.
Yeah, we picked on you real hard, so thank you. Appreciate it.
So what you guys didn't know was on Micah and Austin's cards, Micah was a Caucasian student and Austin was an African American student. So now knowing those facts that you didn't know before, who do you think better went about the situation, Cheyenne or myself?
I'll go Cheyenne on this one.
Thanks, Stu.
Why would you go Cheyenne, Stephen?
A lot of positive reinforcement.
Right, so she reinforced Micah by reminding him that he would get a reward at the end of completing his assignment. Now I did that too, but what did I do wrong?
when you were talking to Austin, like you just like, he said, oh, I don't want to do it, and you said, that's fine, leave, instead of like working with him to like try and help him get it done.
Right, so that is where the school to prison pipeline comes from. So I let Micah complete his work, I redirected him to continue working on his work to where Austin was an African American student, and I said, all right, just leave, go to the principal. Not really going to deal with you today. So that's where the school to prison pipeline connection comes in for scenario number 2.
And I would also like us to realize that of course it's a simulation within the classroom, and especially we're comfortable with each other, we know each other, and it's funny to think of, but it does happen often out into the schools, and it's very sad to see kids continuously tossed out very easily, and that might only be the first time it happens in one day. It definitely, possibly, and does happen to other kids more than one time within a day. Also, we could have removed many privileges from Austin that we wouldn't have removed from Micah. And it does happen all the time, and that's why we have problems like the school to prison pipeline. If you have scenario number 3, this is our final scenario. If you could act accordingly, please.
Stop. Don't talk to me. No. Stop talking to me. No. I'm not doing it. Stop talking to me. No, I don't want to work with you.
Thank you. So, Kelsey, we identified her as a student with autism. Sometimes students with autism do not always like to interact with other children, sometimes have a hard time communicating, and we had them, Steven's card said, you're working on a paired assignment with Kelsey. As she refuses to speak to you, please try to work with her. So you're going to have situations in the classroom where students with disabilities are paired with students who are non-disabled. And you want to approach that situation carefully because, well, before I keep going, what do you think we could do for Kelsey? She's refusing to do her work. She's not comfortable working with Steven. Micah?
You could, like, if the assignment allows, like, make a way for her to work on her own. Or put her with people she's comfortable with.
Yeah, we do give students choice, especially students with disabilities. We talk to them, would you prefer to work on a specific assignment by yourself? Would that best be suited for you? We want to be as developmentally appropriate for children as we can and give them the best path to learning that we can. So, good with that part.
That's okay.
Yep.
Alright, so just in kind of summing everything up that we talked about, we believe that this is something that teachers should have when they, as we talked about, get their